Hello, everybody. I'm Erica Friedman. I'm a person who thinks a lot about Yuri, writes about it, talks about it, watches it, reads it. And I'm really, really glad that you're here with me today for CitrusCon 2025. This is, I think, my third or fourth year here. And as has become the tradition, you are the guinea pigs for my new material. And I'm a bit winging it, so and I don't have the chat open while I have my presentation open, so I will ask CitrusCon folks if you would just keep an eye on any interesting questions for me to be thought out answer at the end, and I will do my best to answer all your questions. But I really wanted to start today by saying, here in 2025, I think it's more important than ever to have, to consume, and to create queer media. We're all saying we're not going back into the closet. We're saying, our friends are welcome with us. And that is powerful. And we need to keep saying that and be as public and loud. And this Pride Month, I want us all to remember that Pride was not a march. Pride was not a rainbow. What Pride was, and it wasn't even a riot, Pride, the Stonewall Uprising, was the day that a bunch of young gay people and a bunch of trans people got fucking sick of the fascists. And I want to start with that because we are back here and I want you to understand this was where we began. We are here again, but things are so different. You don't ever have to be closeted. You don't have to go to clubs that are run by the mafia who are paying off the cops to occasionally just come in and arrest everybody so that you have to end up paying off the cops too. I mean, it was so corrupt. It was so vile. But on this really, really hot day in a hot summer of a miserable, miserable year, I want you to know this is so important. This is just so important. I'm so glad that you're here with me today to talk about how much has changed and how much hasn't. So we're going to start with Yuri Fandom, Then and Now. And I would like to thank the folks on Blue Sky when I said, what would you like to talk to me about? Some folks said demographics or history. And so here we are. A lot of this is from my book, which is next to me by your side. And you can read some of this. But also, I just want to talk about it in context of 2025 because I wrote my book a few years ago. And now things have changed and maybe gone backwards. And so we're going to talk a little bit about how a lot of what we do is irrevocably different. Things can never be the same as it was. So let's get started and find out why. This story begins before the internet. And it begins in a time where libraries weren't carrying gay books. There was no TV or radio. There were no movies. There were a few movies here and there, and everybody knew about them. There was a subculture, and every country had its own subculture. And remembering that for Yuri, it began in Japan, we're going to talk about Japan's subculture. So before the internet, lesbians did have ways of communicating. The number one way they had of communicating was newsletters. And they would write these newsletters up. They were often just one off or two off. They were little organizations that came together and then dropped out. They would put together a party and then it would break up. And those things were put out at lesbian bars or in local community bookstores. And that was how you knew somebody was going to be there, and or how you could get somebody to join. The one on the right here is a very interesting little thing. It says Barazoku to Yurizoku no Omiai Kai. And what that means is the Barazoku was the gay group, and that was based on the name Barazoku given to gay men by Ito Bunkaku, who wrote Barazoku magazine. So in Barazoku magazine, he had a page for lesbians called the Yurizoku no Heya. This is all very famous stuff. But I want to say, so the Yurizoku and the Barazoku would get together. This is basically a gay get-together. And the nice thing about this in 81 was that you could bring your gay friend as your date, and then he'd go off and hang out with the guys, you'd hang out with the women. And so that was a lot of ways that gay folks would just meet. And while I'm saying Yuri Fandom, this was not a Yuri Fandom. This was a queer community. The other thing we had was magazine section letters like Barazoku or Gecko Luna. And this whole issue that I have the cover of here is the lesbian issue, which is delightful and wonderful. But women would write these letters to the magazine saying, "Are there any other women in X town?" And this was not about Yuri. There was nothing about it as Yuri. But if you go to Luna, you see there's illustrations, there's little comics. So manga culture is so embedded in Japanese everyday culture that it was already there even before there was a tie-in with manga or a tie-in with when manga and lesbian life ever really connected. There was always a connection. Before the internet, we had doujinshi. So Comiket began in the mid 70s. So we're already talking about a culture of comics and manga that were being shared in public in large spaces in so that readers had that parasocial relationship. We think about parasocial relationships a lot now because of the internet, but this was really a very key parasocial relationship. I would write comics as whomever, and the people would buy my comics and know me as whomever. And this went on well into the 21st century, where sometimes the only thing you know about a comic artist is the stuff they put online or the stuff they publish in doujinshi. I put my two of my oldest doujinshi. The one on the left is from 1996. There are obviously doujinshi much earlier than that. This is my earliest Yuri doujinshi, and this is a circle of people. You see, it says Ona Ona Only Communications Books, 1996, March the 5th, and they got together and they were using Xerox machines and whiteout and screen tone to draw these and put the tone in. This was people literally sitting on the floor, cutting and pasting. I've gone to the Margaret exhibition to see some of the original art of Margaret magazine artists, and they were literally using like whiteout to make like effects and ink splashes. So when you look at old comics, I want you to really think about how these things were built. That people, this is labor of love, baby. I mean, it's hard now to make comics, but it was so much harder then. On the right, I wanted to share this page. This is an artist who I only know as Angie, and I know nothing about Ong. I don't know where she landed. I don't know who she was. I don't know if she ever did comics ever again. I have a bunch of her stuff, and I love it. But again, you could see the screen tone use and the cutouts in the back and the sound effects. All these things were done physically by hand with screen tones that they had to scrape on. So I'm just going to say to you, this was seriously a labor of love. And so when people came to Comiket or Comitia at that time and said, you know, I want to buy your book, it was such a significant moment, right? A person who may or may not be queer, is acknowledging you as a queer artist. It was a hugely important way to know that you weren't alone. Also before the internet, and I didn't add this because it's not media related, are the bars. The bars in Shinjuku were a tremendously important part of lesbian and gay culture, and they really aren't nearly as much anymore, but they still exist because they're still important. But if you were, I remember, sorry, old lady story time. I remember the 1980s, my wife and I going into New York City and walking around the village and walking around St. Mark's Place and thinking, you know, oh, if only we lived here, we could hang out here all the time, right? And so we liked St. Mark's Place because not only did it have the drug addicts and the queers, but it also had comic stores. So it was sort of a perfect place for us. That was the importance of the bars back then. It was really, really important that you had somewhere to go where you could be yourself and everybody, you know, would accept you. And this is how lesbians communicated before the internet. Again, we had before the internet. This is so interesting. I don't know if anybody here, and again, I don't have the chat open because I don't want to distract myself, but if you're in the chat right now, can you put who you think these two artists are and see if anybody gets it right? And some of you might know because it's in my book, and some of you might know because I've talked about it before. But both of these artists are fan artists who became very famous Yuri artists and were leaders in this. And one of them at least might really surprise you if you don't know the name. But On the left, we have a Sailor Moon fan book, and that is by an artist that I'm going to guarantee you have all read and many of you love. And on the right here, Love Revolution is actually a nonfiction book about queer life. That is Dojinshi by another artist who I adore and have talked about many, many times, and whose work has been translated into English. And so if you know the names, put them in there. So what was happening is you'd have these folks, queer writers, queer artists, people who were compelled by queer material, which I want to make the distinction because not every Yuri artist is in fact themselves a sexual or gender minority or isn't out as one, certainly, and that is true even to this day. So I want to be really, really clear about how not every one of them is one of us, but it doesn't matter. It's absolutely unimportant. If the stories are real and the stories are relevant and the stories speak to us, they are lovely and wonderful. So some of them would start reading these Yuri Dojinshi, these lesbian comics, and then they'd started to work on their own. And so we're now talking about the late 90s and early, in this case, 93 and like about 94, so mid 90s. And we're talking about people who are starting to realize that they also have stories they want to tell. And this was a really big thing, again, with the parasocial relationships of Komiket. And there have been articles about that, where, you know, we've all read this, right? Where a fan gets angry at an author because they didn't do whatever. They shipped the wrong character or they killed off somebody. And, you know, that fan who sadly was unhinged got really upset and went, you know, death threats or whatever. But there's a lot more to parasocial relationships. We as readers often want to participate in the narrative. And I remember very vividly a friend of my wife's one day, I was talking to my wife about something about Maria Samagamiteru, and she says, "You speak about them like they're your friends." And I said, "They are. Full stop. They're not real, but they're part of my narrative. So they are indeed my friends." And this is a way that we relate to authors as well. I don't necessarily know, in this case, I do know both these authors. It doesn't matter because I have relationships with them through their work. And so while I've got you all on my horse about this, don't write death threats to authors. That's really weird. That's you. That's something wrong with you. Okay. I just want to say it is not okay or normal to death threat an author. If you don't like their work, just stop reading. I'm just going to say that. On behalf of all authors everywhere, that parasocial relationships can be wonderful and they can lead to real friendships. Almost everybody I'm friendly with through Okazu and Yuricon has turned out to be a really great person that I'm proud to know and consider a friend. And I do consider all my patrons and supporters to be part of my family. But obviously, if you got weird sending me death threats, that would not be the truth anymore. Once again, before the internet, what did we have? We had magazines. And again, I brought these two particular covers on purpose. Again, these are two artists whose work has been translated into English, and they are in their own ways very famous. On the right is Rika Takashima, that's who did the covers for the first Anis magazines, and I published her book, Rika Takanji. It was the first Yuri manga ever published into English, and I still am friendly with her, and she's still a wonderful artist. On the left is Friedman magazine, which actually came just before Anis. It actually came out for one issue. And Friedman, two, I apologize, two. The cover there is by Sakurazawa Erika, who is an extremely famous, well-known josei artist in Japan. And one of her books, Between the Sheets, was actually translated by Tokyopop as one of the very first josei manga ever to come over into America. Very, very hard to find now, but if you can find it, it's a very interesting, bittersweet story. So again, these magazines, these are lesbian magazines. These are not magazines that are, you know, kind of vaguely lesbian-ish or can be misinterpreted. These are lesbian magazines for lesbian community, and they have very famous artists on them. So again, another way Yuri manga and lesbian community sort of were right from the beginning already totally entwined. So the internet. I tried so hard to figure out a really clever visual way to explain this, and it didn't work at all. So basically, back in the day, we had things like Usenet, we had mailing lists, we had forums. We had magazines. So the internet changes everything, right? It's suddenly now we have people who are scanning in Japanese doujinshi. Americans are reading them. People from other countries are involving themselves in conversations. And we have in Usenet, we had the overarching Rec Arts anime, and we had alt fan Sailor Moons. We had all these little teeny slices of fandom where you'd be fans of one thing. We had something like mailing lists, like the Utena mailing list or the Yuricon mailing list, which originally started as the ALC mailing list. The fanfic mailing list, which was ended up being like a massive, uncontrollable beast of multiple fandoms that hated each other's guts, but were all really committed to writing fanfic, which was just funny. We had forums, shoujoai.com, MAL. It was like things like that made communities. When we're overseas, we don't have instant access to the original work, but we all want to talk about it, and we all want to have space. And I'm starting to get into, as you go here, when you've got these early pieces on the left, we did have magazines at the turn of the 21st century. We had On America, which was where I started getting my first writing chops, Otaku USA, which I think is still online. And then from there, the conversation started getting more personal and slicing up again and again. We have blogs like Okazu, my blog, also things like Yuri Kokoro and Small Call. Small Call was a fantastic little blog, underappreciated, but every single year as Komiket came around, they would list every single Yuri Dojinshi circle and where they were and who was there and what series they were covering. And oh my God, was that the most useful thing in the world, because I couldn't get a hold of the catalog to Komiket until I got into Japan. So having that list where I could just walk up and be like, all right, I'm going to be in this section first. It was magic. It was wonderful. And then, of course, what started happening is we getting online news systems, so Anime News Network, Anime Herald, Otaku USA goes online, and something like Okazu becomes bigger into news. And then we start getting into social media. And I'll make a point here sort of visually that in social media, I think we have to just acknowledge Twitter changed the dialogue. It created a much more thriving social online presence for anime and manga. So manga Twitter was a massive player in this field, and that's why I really like Blue Sky, because it kind of gives people a place to port when you don't want to be on that hell site. But you still want to be able to have those kinds of conversations that are very far ranging and cross fandoms, and really, really get like people who are in the publishing industry and the creators and the translators and the letterers are all having discourse, but like, oh, hey, I got to, Brandon Bovia, I got to letter this, that kind of thing. And you could say, wow, I really like panel 127. And he's not going to go, oh, weirdo. Like, it's great. But I also want to say Discord is so funny. And it's why I picked that one simple visual, because we're back at the beginning, man. Usenet was a bunch of weird little groups where you couldn't necessarily get, have conversations about more than one thing. And everything was sliced really thin. So we had Rec Arts Anime, and the Rec Arts Anime this, and the Rec Arts Anime that, and then Alt Fan Sailor Moon, Alt Fan this, Alt Fan this. And now we're in Discord where we have like, oh, I don't know, the Wata Oshi, the I'm in Love with the Villainess Discord, or the Okazu Discord, and like, you have these much, much small slices again. So we've kind of come full circle from very small segmented little groups and mailing lists and forums to very small little segmented groups and discords. But the trip has been a trip, let me tell you. So some things have changed and some things have not changed. But what definitely positively did change is the internet created global impact. Up until very, very recently, every Japanese company, when they licensed anything out, they didn't really honestly believe that the other part of the world outside Japan was really monetarily a big deal. Yes, Sailor Moon was a global phenomenon. Yes, Dragon Ball was a global phenomenon, but those were very rare. Like, those are really, really big things. Like, even Yu Yu Hakusho, which, as big as it was, massive in Japan, never really kind of got the traction, right? And then what happened is the internet changed that, because people could start seeing those things and talking about them, and the money started flowing back in a way that it hadn't when it was just fans drawing stuff online. So you have fans drawing stuff in the artist alley. You know, nothing about Naruto is getting past that transaction. When you have Naruto being licensed, and then the official goods being licensed, and the anime being sold, and then the official goods being sold, and the manga being sold, and you see how it sort of snowballs, right? And so by the time Boruto comes out, a global phenomenon, global impact. And that has been not only true, but extremely important for Yuri fandom. I'm going to talk about that. But first, let's talk about who we were and who we are now. So in 2007, which is an almost impossibly long 18 years ago, Yuri Hime magazine was not yet Comic Yuri Hime magazine. So real quick about that. In 2003, Yuri Shimai launches, and Yuri Shimai was only around for like a year. And they licensed some amazing artists, and they only lasted a couple of issues, and they were a quarterly magazine. I think like basically 1 year, maybe 5, 6 issues. And then Ichi bought it and relaunched it as Yuri Hime. And I don't know what happened, but I do know that a lot of those original artists sort of finished their stories and never came back. So I don't know what was going on there. But in 2007, Yuri Hime had a crisis of identity because the editor at the time, who was a man, went on the assumption that men were the biggest set of Yuri fans and was licensing stuff for that. And everyone kept saying, maybe not. And they did a survey. And as you can see, kind of pretty clearly, at the time, 70% of the readers were female and 30% were identifying as male, which changed the way they did things. I'm not sure maybe for the better. So what they did at the time was they split into 2 magazines, Yuri Hime and Yuri Hime S. And Yuri Hime S was Yuri for towards men, and Yuri Hime was towards women. Ultimately, thankfully, in 2010, they put it back together again because it never made any sense. And half the time, the stuff in Yuri Hime S was better than the stuff in Yuri Hime. It made no sense. Totally bizarre. You could still find this survey if you're doing any research, by the way. I put the link down there. Grab a snapshot of the screen. It's on Web Archive. This page is long gone, but it's a real useful little thing to have. And you could see that the age split was kind of surprisingly consistent. Also, everyone, obviously, lesbians die when they hit 30 years old because you only get to about 30 years old and it's like, and over. I was like, no other people. Okay. So it had been nearly 20 years at this point, and I thought to myself, well, who are we? I had done a little survey in 2008 about Okazu readers, but I'm like, I really want to know who we are, and global impact is a thing. So in 2023, I ran the Global Yuri Fandom Survey on Okazu. And I got about 1,600 people to respond from all over the world. And I mean literally all over the world. It was like an amazing map of the world. And again, there's the link on the bottom for you if you want to grab that link. The survey results are still up on Okazu, and I did a little analysis. But what you can see is that the age in that particular case had changed kind of radically. So 18 to 25 were the biggest group. And by the way, don't tell me that I got the age ranges wrong. I know, I even comment on that. I totally borked the age ranges, so just bear with it. 1825 was by far and away the largest group, which means that Yuri fandom is much, much younger overall than it used to be, which I think is really great because it means that the needs, the requirements of young people coming up saying that they want their stuff more queer and more varied and more nuanced, with more sexual and gender minority identity is fantastic. You'll see that gender was sort of interesting too. Just over 50% of the global Yuri fandom identified as female. There was about just under a quarter that identified as male, and then the other a little bit more than a quarter was other things. And other none of the above, of course, takes up a big chunk because there's a lot of different identities, and you can only put so many answers on a survey or it starts getting really weird and long. And the sexuality was very interesting too. So while lesbian and bisexuals make up the bulk of Yuri fandom, there's a lot of others. And again, heterosexual people identify as heterosexuals a little under 20%, 1/5. And the reason I did this ultimately, and I say this in my analysis, is because when I got into Yuri, back in the late 90s on Usenet, I kept hearing from all these straight guys that Yuri's not for you, it's for us. And I kept saying, I don't agree because I'm here, I exist. I bet there are other people, which is why I started Yuricon. So I wanted to prove. So we actually have actual statistical proof now that Yuri Fandom is only about a quarter straight men, and that's fine. It's cool. I'm not dissing straight men. If you're a straight guy out there listening, you're always welcome at Yuricon. But I just want to say it never has been for you. It's been for all of us, and it is for all of us. And this is what I say about Yuri, that it's by anyone and for anyone who likes Yuri, and that's really the real story of Yuri right now. The fandom is as varied as you can imagine it to be, and that pleases me beyond anything. So that's who we were. Who we are is probably still the same thing. Comic Hero, well, Yuri Hime did not ask a very nuanced question. I'm betting that if at the time in 2007 they had the language or the ability or the desire to have a more nuanced understanding of who Yuri Fandom was, I'm sure it would have been at the time too, but we're different now. So I want to talk about the impact of global fandom, and I'm going to kind of rush through this a little bit because it's a work in progress. So I want to give a lot of the big impact for global Yuri Fandom to Kabi Nagata, whose My Lesbian Experience with Loneliness not only became a huge blockbuster in Japan online, it opened up sharing manga online to become a blockbuster. It was absolutely the first online comic that just completely went off the charts. It brought comic essays to Western fandom, and we're getting more comic essays with things like The Bride Was a Boy, for instance. We're getting more comic essays here, but the fact that she was the first one really to just do blockbuster numbers with a comic essay was really significant. And she opened the door both in Japan and America. Not that she was the first one to do this, but she really broke it open with manga about mental and physical health. And she continues to write about her mental and physical health as an essayist. And I think that's really important that it wasn't just a one shot. She has a new book, a new series, excuse me, starting last week in a new magazine. So I think we really cannot stress enough how important Kabi Nagata's work was to the global impact. At this point, she was on Pixiv and she got all these comments in Japanese, and so she was licensed in Japan. And then all these people were starting to go, I would read that book in English. I would read that book in English, commenting on her work online in other languages, to the point where other countries started licensing her work. And that was probably one of the first real examples we have to outside Japan fandom reaching into Japan and shaking them a bit and going, give me book, right? So that was really important. And I didn't put this here, but I really do want to say we cannot undersell the importance of Kabi Nagata's book having the word lesbian in the title. And I've talked about this elsewhere, that until this book, lesbian wasn't used. It was Yuri, girls love, shoujo, whatever they used. Nobody wanted to say the word lesbian. She has lesbian in the title. It made a difference. It made a big difference. I'm in love with the villainess. Again, so much more significant than maybe you realize. So it has straight up tons of gender and sexual minority representation. I guess straight up is not the right term. Forefronted gender and sexual minority representation. So this is one of the first books we've really got that's a big seller. That's like, hi, queer characters here. Just want you to know. And of course, that's that moment in the first book where, you know, Misha turns to Ray and says, so, are you what they call a homosexual? And it was like, wow. And then Ray has the conversation, and they have the conversation every single time. It's important. Wow. We had never, ever seen anything like that before. That was so significant. And then for that book to become such a freaking multinational hit on top of that. So not only was this was a book that was in digital form in Japan. It became huge as a digital book. It got over here as licensed as other countries before it got licensed in print in Japan. So talk about global impact. We know for absolute sure, we can say that it was popular enough to be licensed in print outside Japan before it got licensed for print inside Japan. Also, and this is my own thing, the entire thing is based around a story of income inequality, huge social topic, a book about queer characters and income inequality. I just want you to think about what does that mean when you're talking about a Japanese, when manga started hitting America, if you interview the average Japanese person, they would just say they're middle class, even if they were filthy rich, right? But generally speaking, most Japanese people felt they were middle class, and honestly, that is no longer true, as their government is doing the same thing that every other government is doing, which is cutting services and cutting benefits and cutting the social networks. So younger Japanese people are coming into the world more aware of things like income inequality and homelessness and bigger issues of society, not just, oh, we're a happy homogeneous society. They're like, actually no. And so this was such an impactful series, and I hope you all have had a chance to read it. I just picked volume 4 because I really like the cover. The 5 volumes of the novels are extraordinary. They start very silly, high fantasy, and by the end you are so far away from that, and it's so good. And that fifth novel just does something really extraordinary. So I hope you've all read it, because I really do think it's an incredibly important series. Also a lot of fun, and magic and everything else. So, okay, can we talk about this book? I know you guys call it the Green Yuri. I really wish you wouldn't. I also know the guy she was interested in wasn't a guy at all. Does not allow itself to be easily shortened. Kinyoto in Japanese. I know you're not going to call it Kinyoto. We just call it the guy in the house. So we just call it the guy. I want to say something about this. My wife does not read a lot of Yuri. She has become obsessed with this book, and not in the TikTok word obsessed. I mean, she reads these 2 volumes in English. She starts one, finishes, starts the other, finishes, goes back to the other one, and just keeps reading them in a cycle, which I think is unbelievably charming. Um, I've given her all sorts of Yuri stuff, and she's liked a lot, but not as much as she's like this. And she's actually gone so far as to follow Arai Sensei on Instagram, which so cute. Uh, okay, again, online book, online debut. Obviously, the color scheme made it instantly recognizable. Brilliant move by the artist. Online debut with a instant global fandom. Huge, monstrous. That was it. Not only is it popular enough that I have already seen it in multiple languages, I actually saw it in French in Paris before I ever saw it in America. So that was just wonderful and fantastic. But it's instantly licensable, instantly licensed, and this is the part that really is the step forward from that. So we have the big global fandom and lots of big push. Kinokuniya, which is a Japanese bookstore, has multiple locations all over the world, has several locations here in America, including one here in my state, New Jersey, and one in New York City, right in Midtown across from the library. I walked up to the Kinokuniya, and the entire front of the store was the guy she was interested in, wasn't a guy at all. I mean, the whole entire front just plastered in that bright green. You walked into the store, there was shelves of it, shelves of the books, the merchandise, the books in English and Japanese. I just couldn't believe it. And when I came up to the top floor where the Japanese stuff is, not only was there a whole chunk of that, there was a shelf tag in Kinokuniya that said Yuri GL and then Yuri in English. And I went, I win. I literally was standing there and I thought, we won. We won. We did it. I got that shelf tag, that permanent shelf tag, a section. I've spent the last 20 years. Yay, we won. You guys are awesome. And the guy she was interested in wasn't the guy at all, was the tipping point. It's so fucking huge. And I say that with absolute love. I do think it's a darling little book. It's not gay, but it's certainly queer, and it's just fun. But I think it's amazing that publishers are doing so much to promote this quirky little story with, as somebody on the Discord, the Okazu Discord said, Dad Rock as a background, which I felt Kurt Cobain actually roll in his grave when that was said. Dad Rock. This was so impactful. It's such a tremendously, tremendously important book. And I'm sure all of you have been screaming in the comments, love bullet, love bullet. I know. And the funny thing was, I was away when this whole thing hit, and I was literally in Paris that week, and I'm going, oh, big thing in Yuri, big thing happening in the Yuri world, not there. Oh well, didn't have my computer. I was just on phone. So yeah, love bullet. A Yuri fan, who was not me, made this happen. Came out screaming, this thing is about to be canceled. Let's make it big. Yen has licensed it. It's going to be coming out in English. And it was a successful online campaign. And this is why that's so important. It was non-Japanese fans who made this book happen. This book was about to be canceled. It had gotten kind of okay sales, but not really great sales. And I looked back 2 days later, and it had been sold out everywhere. Everywhere. Amazon sold out. Kadokawa sold out. Kinokuniya sold out. Sanseido sold out. I mean, it just everywhere had been sold out. So you guys did it. It's a you thing. You guys did this, and that's global impact. It was huge. And then, of course, the overseas licensing of it. And I don't know if you've all read it, and I hope you have. I hope you've all read it in Japanese and not read illicit scans, because don't tell me that ever for any reason. But it's a really interesting book, and I did do a review of it, and it was not at all what I expected. So I'm so impressed with it, and I'm so impressed with Yuri Fandom for really saving this book and just making it real. It's really, really fantastic. Global fandom wins. And one more thing, I want to talk about global fandom of Thai GL. So Thai BL was getting bigger and bigger to the point where they were exporting it back into Japan. And now Gap the series led to international popularity for Thai GL, and BLGL series actually made it possible to pass marriage equality in Thailand, because the messages within the stories, I'm using Gap, but they literally had a bit where they like turn to the audience and go, and by the way, you shouldn't be, you should be really supportive of your gay kids, like they actually kind of said that. I don't want to say they said it that way, but they kind of did. And also it's leading to more boys love and girls love, and Yuri from manhwa, Abaiha from China, Vietnam, Korea, Thailand, and Japan. And a lot of it is streaming on Gaga Ulala, which is a streaming service that has all the TV series, all the movies, lesbian, gay. There's a ton of free stuff to look there. Please take a look. They're doing all sorts of Pride Month specials where you have like a free week, and also there's a couple of things that they're showing, like the first episode or two or a whole thing free. Take a look. It's great. I just watched The Handsome Stewardess. It was super fun. That was from Taiwan. That was Taiwan yelling at Singapore to stop being so conservative. So that was super fun. And one more, the Impact of Global Fandom. We have Gullet Magazine. I've been screaming about it for about 7 years now. It's a really wonderful creator-owned, crowd-funded Yuri manga magazine, original Yuri. And at this point, they've had 3 incredibly successful Kickstarters for English editions. Not only have they done these incredibly successful Kickstarters, but now they've really motivated other creators to do more Yuri through Kickstarter, which means that we're getting more Yuri directly funded from the creators themselves, like Anedo and Yurina Miyuki have both done them, and a bunch of other folks. So it's amazing that the global fandom impact is so huge now that Galette could say, okay, we're just going to have an English language magazine, and boof, there it is, And that's it for the impact of global Yuri fandom's impact of Yuri fandom then and now. This is where you can find me. Feel free to, again, snap a screenshot of this or follow me on the Discord, Okazu Discord. And do I actually put the Discord here? No, I don't put my Discord here. But follow me on any of these things. Oh, wow, I didn't change the Twitter. So I'm not on Twitter anymore. I don't use Twitter anymore. I guess this is an old slide. But you can find me on Blue Sky and everywhere else. And I do have an Okazu Discord, which is linked at the Yuricon links page. And you can find me there. I'm there almost all the time. And now I'm going to stop sharing and take some questions. Okay, what can I answer for you? Let's go. I'm going to scroll back up. CitrusCon, do you have anything you saw that was really good?
I did see one question pop up. Someone had a clarification question about the pie charts for the slide with the demographic information.
Okay.
And
so
just,
what are we looking
at the pie chart for sexuality was separate from the one about gender. So whether
Yes.
straight numbers would be men and women, etc.
Yeah, I separated them out because I wanted to get a better understanding of the. I do think of sexual and gender minorities as one group because we have to be, because we want to band together, and I want everybody to support one another. Minorities do have to band together, but I do think it's good to understand the gender a little bit because I know that, like, for instance, if you had asked me in 2007, am I male or female, I would have said female, but now I identify as non-binary. People change. But also, I wanted to get an idea of how my readers identified, I guess is really what I'm asking is like, who are we? How queer are we? Are we still mostly um, heterosexual, or I mean, it's not heterosexual, cis or other, and I kind of wanted to get a sense of where is the queernesses among us, and it was really just sort of a personal. It wasn't really there wasn't really a lot of super dense thought because I'm not a sociologist. I was more or less just trying to see who we are is really the question I was trying to answer is who are we? I hope that's a little clarification. I do want to say that I saw the line, we've come full oval. Yes, that was very good. We have come indeed full oval. Um, Beauty's Blade. Yes, somebody's saying Beauty's Blade is a Chinese baihe who is being translated by Seven Seas in November. Also, Baiheverse is Baiheverse. Baiheverse is a publisher of Nothing But Baihe. They're doing web comics, they're doing some audiobooks, and they're going to be putting out some bigger stuff. So, thank you. The Uranus and what do we have here? Which one are we talking about? I've got Uranus and Neptune up there, and I don't know who else I have. I've got a bunch of stuff up here. Anyway, these are all my happy things, right? So, all right. So yeah, that's part of why I wanted to do a 2023 edition is because when you looked at us back and when you talked to people back in 2007, we didn't have a lot of the words anymore like that we have. We have words now, we have understanding now, identity now that we didn't necessarily have in 2007, or we did, but it wasn't really thought about or talked about. So it wasn't, no, I'm sorry, I just want a real quick answer. Is there any archive where we can read some of those old 90s and before doujinshi? No, and please don't ask me where you can read things illicitly. I very, very strongly give a reaction to that. No, those things were never meant to be archived. There, I have files right here. If you look over here, there's like literally rows and rows of books. And there were impermanent things that were meant to just be read at the time and kept for a little while and then gotten rid of. And I'm sure they wouldn't necessarily. Oh, you want me to show? Let's see. I'll show you. Those are my doujinshi collection right there. It's just shelves and shelves and shelves of those boxes and boxes. But no, I don't really. The problem with that is I would think that you would have to ask every single creator, to be honest, to make sure that you got their permission because they created it's not ours to share. So, oh, why shouldn't people call green Yuri? Because I don't like reductiveness. There was a time back in the day when people used to call Japanese moon language, and it really, really just pissed me off because it's not moon language. We're not 4-year-olds, and I understand that it's an easy way to identify, but we could just say the guy she wasn't interested in wasn't the guy at all. That's all. I'm just saying. You could just say that. It's all right. I get it. But do I have any favorite gender non-conforming characters? I don't know if you can see that I have Haruka Michiru right here and here. Yeah. But a lot of them. I have a lot of them. Women in suits is my favorite thing. So there you go. All right, and so I will say something about the word himejoshi. I hate it with a fiery passion, and here's why. It's not just me being weird. And you're welcome to say green Yuri if you want. I don't care. But himejoshi this is why that's the wrong word. Comic Yuri Hime magazine put a thing out like way back. They put a series out called Yuri Danshi. Now you know about Fujoshi and Fudanshi, right? The BL. I cannot stand gendering fandom. There is literally no reason that Yuri fandom has to be gendered. So I'm not saying you shouldn't call yourself Himejoshi. I wish you wouldn't. we are Yurijin. We are all people of Yuri. And I absolutely reject fundamentally the gendering of Yuri fandom. And Hime Joshi is about the magazine. It's not really about, it was comic Yuri Hime, so Hime Danshi and Hime Joshi, which has nothing to do with the genre. So I chose, and I will stick with Yurijin, which is people of Yuri, and I would much prefer to see people using that. Hime Joshi just really irritates the hell out of me, so that's that. Yes, people of Yuri, Yuri tribe. Any thoughts on Revolutionary Girl Utena? Oh, many thousands of hours of thoughts on Revolutionary Girl Utena. Absolutely. Yeah, Yurijin. Yurijin. And no Himejin, just Yurijin, because we are the people of Yuri. We're a people of Yuri. So, yes, Yuri folk. I don't use Yuri Zoku because that's lesbian, so I go with Yurijin. And I also really feel strongly about us not gendering it. Every other fandom can have their gendering. I just can't stand it. Yuri is for everyone and is by anyone and for everyone, and we're just people. So back to Utena. My thoughts on Utena. It was so remarkable for its time, and 25 years later, it's still unbeatable in many different things, really. And I hope you'll all really go back and watch it from time to time. The hard parts get harder to watch every time. Like, I remember being skeeved by a lot of it when I watched it the first time, but like the 40th time I watched it, I'm like, these aren't getting easier. Like, it's really hard in some places. Do you have any opinions on how to a relationship? I actually don't really. I think it's not for me, to be very honest, and I don't think it's bad. But I have somebody else doing reviewing of it on Okazu. We have our staff writer Matt Marcus does it. He does a fantastic job. I would highly, highly recommend looking at his reviews on that. And that's part of why I love having staff writers in Okazu, because sometimes I don't want to have to be the person to say something, and particularly if it's something that's not resonating with me, I don't want to just go, yeah, I didn't like it. That's not a good review. It doesn't help anybody. But if I have somebody who's different than me who goes, yeah, this is why I like it, then you got good stuff. There's a lot of stuff out there for everybody now. There's so much good Yuri out there that we're at a point now, remarkably, that I can no longer keep up in any language. There was a time when I could keep up in Japanese, and then there was a time I could keep up in Japanese and English, and then there was a time I could keep up in English, and now I can't at all. And that's why I have staff writers and guest writers to come in and also do reviews. We have people who will review things that I'm not going to touch with a 15-foot pole for various reasons. Citrus I found like a ridiculous train wreck. I just thought it was just too rapey for me. So also Citrus hits something. I have in my book a chapter about lesbianism and the Freudian attachment of lesbianism to pathology, mental pathology, and so mental unwellness. And that actually was a thing. Gayness and lesbianism were both considered a pathology, a disease, for many decades, many centuries, until particularly decades after Freud, until 1973, when it was removed from the list of diseases. So my problem with Citrus and things like it is that, like, May in Citrus has all the hallmarks, behavioral hallmarks of somebody who's been sexually abused. And it's never said that way. And not only is it not said, it's like hand waved away. Oh, she was neglected. I have a whole chapter about that in my book, about how that phrase is so enraging and why all those characters were neglected. Just, yeah, whatever. So, I mean, it's okay to not like things, right? There's so much out there. I could absolutely see if you didn't like Sailor Moon, or you didn't like Utena, or you didn't like Utena was complicated, or G-Witch, right? The Gundam, Mobile Suit Gundam, the Witch from Mercury. I could absolutely 100% totally sympathize if you watch that and go, kill them all, because I'm rewatching it right now. And I have to do it when I'm in a really good mood because it's really hard. And it's a Gundam, which means you're really watching a story about children soldiers suffering emotional and physical damage. So we can all have, hopefully at this point, nuanced thoughts about this, that we can like and not like things. And it's okay to have things that we like and don't like. I like a lot, like things like, let me grab this here. Do I keep this right behind me on purpose? Yeah, yeah, I do. Boyish. Can you see this? Boyish. This is a Butch Yuri anthology by a bunch of artists in Japan. They did a Kickstarter. They did a second Kickstarter, but not so since they got really, really sick and hasn't gotten the second volume out yet. Um, so I love that we can watch and read stuff from people directly now. That's a question. What do I think about people who say that lesbian media should only have good representation? I think that it's very easy to say things. It's very easy to just go, I think thing. What do you say to someone who has a non-nuanced point of view? Are we for? Like, no. I like evil psychotic lesbians. I've always liked evil psychotic lesbians. Most of Okazu, all my early stuff was about evil psychotic lesbians. I mean, I was super excited that Dark Horse is putting out the new version of Gunsmith Cats because I love Goldie. I don't love Misty, but I do love Goldie. Goldie's awesome, and the fact that Misty and Goldie end up together is just it's fine. Do we need all good representation? No, no, we don't. But everybody reads and writes and creates things for different reasons. So some people want it to be fulfilling their need for good, solid representation, in which case I'm Love of the Villainous is a great story, really good, and also has excellent representation. But also I like evil psychotic lesbian mafia dons. Both you can have both. Let's see. Okay, let's see. Yeah, Gundam Wing is harder and harder. Uh, yeah, I know. Sorry, Zoom. I didn't mean to. I didn't mean to spoil that for you. Yeah, it's like a 25-year-old series, so I have a kind of rule about that. You can't really spoil series that are 25 years old, right? But yeah, they do, and it's great. It's so much better. It's so much better than like Misty getting to get suffering after Rally. Like forget it. Rally's pointless. Have I read any Western Sapphic novels specifically? I have actually. I do write about them on Okazu all the time. I have a category called novels. I recommend you look at that. They're not light novels because I have a category for that too. So if you go on the right side, there's a drop down for category. There's novels. I do read a lot, and I read a lot of genre work. I have just read. I'm gonna have to get the name of it because the names are a little complicated. Excuse me one moment while I pull this up. Um, because the names are just a bit much. But the one that I just finished reading this week was The Potency of Ungovernable Impulses by Malka Older. It is the third in a series of hers that is effectively Holmes and Watson on the platforms outside the rings of Jupiter. It's good. It's good. Malka Older is a great, great writer. I really, really like her work. She's probably most famous for Infomocracy. Um, oh my God, folks, I don't, if you like Conan stuff, like, because you gotta like that stuff. If you don't like that kind of stuff, don't touch this with a 15-foot pole. But if you like Conan stuff, read Red Sonja by Gail Simone. Holy shit, was that great. I have been a fan of Conan since I was a kid. My dad had like first printing Conan books, which when he died, I didn't get for reasons. I love Conan. I love Conan. I love Sonia. I loved all that whole thing. And I had been waiting for this Sonia my whole life. It was perfect. Perfect. I mean, it was violent, but if you know Conan, you know that we're talking about like lots of body chopping, butthole, absolutely outstanding. And Gil Simone, who is a terrific writer and a very decent human being. So that's really Red Sonja was great. Not Detective Conan, Conan the Barbarian. Sorry, sorry about that. Um, yeah, so I absolutely do read a lot, as much as I can of things. Also, the Murderbot series, which if you're neurodivergent, you might really feel in your bones. I certainly, I certainly feel Murderbot. The Murderbot is really great, good stuff. Also, Anne Leckie's Imperial Rock series, very good. And these aren't necessarily non-binary; they're kind of agender characters, but really good. Murderbot's just great. So yeah, She Loves to Cook, She Loves to Eat is fantastic. Donna Under a Crescent is fantastic. Again, if you don't know me well, do go to my blog Okazu. You're going to find me having written more than, almost at this point, we're probably closing in on 6,000 posts. And every year since 2004, I do a best of. There's a category called top lists, top 10 lists. And that gives you my best anime, my best manga, the best things that I think have come out that year. It gets harder every year now that we have so much. And not mentioned any of this. The Lock Tomb, Gideon, the Lock Tomb series. Absolutely. Gideon and Harrow and Nona the Ninth. Fantastic stuff. Absolutely fantastic. Yeah, all systems read really, really good. Yeah, the Lock Tomb series is also not for the faint of heart. Super gay. I really liked it, and funny as hell. At least the first book is really, really funny. And there's like master level sarcasm in there. It's really good stuff. So yeah, I do read quite a lot. I read all the time other stuff. I also read recently something that you might not think is really interesting, but I read a book out, autobiography of George Takei, who played Lieutenant Sulu in the original Star Trek, called It Rhymes with Takei. I would recommend stuff like that. And let me just actually wrap this up with, as you're reading your media things, remember to occasionally go back into your own gay comics history. So America has a really strong gay comics history, and we have some amazing artists who've put together the Queers in Comics event for a couple of years. They went back and they made a lot of recordings of our first generation folks like Howard Cruz and Mary Wings, Trina Robbins, who we recently lost. And then we have our second generation is like Alison Bechdel and Jennifer Camper. And these people are still with us and they're still doing amazing work. So do go into our own historical background and look at the stuff that might be telling stories that you didn't realize you also needed to hear. Like, I absolutely hated Dykes to Watch Out For when I was young, and now I'm finding it hilarious. So clearly, I just needed to age 40 years. I didn't care for Love and Rockets, sorry. It wasn't my thing. But I do read a lot. I got yelled at by my mom at my master's program. I had a book in my sleeve. So, so let's see what else we got here. All right, I think I got to wrap up now because if I do one more, I'll probably talk for 10 minutes. But again, once again, I want to thank you so, so, so much for coming. It was great to have you all. Have a wonderful rest of your CitrusCon, and I'll see you online. Thank you very much.
Thank you for the panel. And yeah, this was recorded, so for anyone who missed it or wants to rewatch, you can wait for it on our YouTube channel later.
Excellent. Thank you.